right, so Ezekiel lesson 5A, going over chapter 40 through 42. So 5B, we will actually do a few more details and get into chapter 43. So that will be your homework over the break. We just got off let me get, just got off that little segment division of, where are we? Vision 9. It was chapter 33, verses 21, and then all the way down to, uh, actually, that should be chapter 39 right there. So we just got done with that segment, and of course, Ezekiel in 38 and 39 is where we ended up, and it's just kind of tracking down into end time, with that final restoration. And so we got that picture of, okay, so there's going to be this war, and we talked about that Gog and Magog war is in this the 7 year tribulation, and Jesus is going to come back and rule and reign for that millennial reign. The Jews will come into salvation as individuals and a nation, and there will be the final day of atonement, final Yom Kippur. Now, in chapter 40, as that's starting out, and we get a timestamp here. In the 25th year of the exile, at the beginning of the year, on the 10th of the month, in the 14th year after the city was taken, on the same day, the hand of the Lord was upon me, and he brought me there. All right, so we have a timestamp. So where does this put us?
$573
Yeah.
EC.
And then did anybody look into at the beginning of the year, or on the 10th month? Did anybody look at that?
I did. I can't remember one of the feasts, I think, right?
I think it's Passover.
That's what I'm thinking. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what we came up with.
Yeah. So the first of the year, the 10th month, would be the beginning of Passover. And then, and this will be on your teaching chart. Katie had a book that she showed us on for her class, and she said that this book with this person who wrote it said it was possibly a Jubilee year. And she quotes the name of the rabbi on the teaching chart. You might be able to take his name and look up on Amazon the book. And so your Jubilee year is, what would happen during the Jubilee year?
That was like a time to reset, renew, kind of where debts would be forgiven, slaves would be freed. It kind of like was a reboost to the economy and all that kind of thing. So
Yeah, and so if this is the beginning of Passover, and then if what this guy is saying is correct, that this was actually a Jubilee year, think of the pictures we have here. And Ezekiel is getting this vision of the third temple. And I mean, we haven't even had the second temple yet, but he's getting this vision of the third temple in that millennial reign at the final restoration. And so just the symbolism and the pictures here are really astounding. And as we go through this, you're like, okay, well, okay, this is this, and it's this long and this high and whatever, and it's here, and all that kind of stuff. And we kind of tend to look at this and go, okay, I don't think I need to know this. Obviously, the people who are building the third temple need to know this. Um, but it's kind of like, sometimes the numbers where you're like, okay, it's too many numbers. There are things in here for us. There is personal application. There are things to draw out of here. Um, and this is just, the significance of this being on the first day of Passover. If it was truly a Jubilee year, just those pictures in general that God is showing them that He has shown to us, those same symbolic meanings are passed on to us today. Jesus came not to abolish the law, but to fulfill the law. So those same pictures apply to us. Um, so there is personal application, and as we start going through all this, and get some of the symbolism of this, I think that um, it'll be more than just drawing some numbers to us. Um, all right, so, and he brought me there in the visions of God. He brought me into the land of Israel and set me on a very high mountain. And on it to the south there was a structure like a city. So he brought me there, and behold, there was a man whose appearance was like the appearance of bronze, with a line of flax and a measuring rod in his hand, and he was standing in the gateway. Then he said to me, Son of man, see with your eyes, hear with your ears, and give attention to all that I am going to show you. For you have been brought here in order to show it to you. Declare to the house of Israel all that you see. So, did anybody look into like who this man might be?
Not a lot of detail, but it kind of sounds like some descriptions of Jesus or possibly just an angel.
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't really think about it like until now, but like the bronze, I think usually that I don't think that's ever, I don't know, I'm just going off the top of my head, but I can't remember anybody else but Jesus being described. Oh, it says like bronze. Um, but I didn't really do a lot of work in it. Um, Obviously, it is a heavenly being. Um, so what about, okay, so see with your eyes, hear with your ears, and we see that a lot. They don't see, they don't hear. Uh, and give attention. Did anybody do a word study on give attention to?
I didn't, but that would have been a good one.
So, the connotation with that is, no, and I don't have a number to it. But like all your soul, all your mind, like your whole being, like paying attention, like taking it in. So it's more than just pay attention. It's take this in. Um, so I actually started boxing whenever he spoke because there's a lot of description of what Ezekiel saw, but there's only a few times that this man or heavenly being speaks. So I started boxing that in. So I boxed that in, his instructions to him. So how could I title verses 1 through 4?
Ezekiel was taken to Israel's high mountains, um, where there was a man with a measuring rod.
Yeah. There's a man with a measuring rod. I did look in, I think it was Revelation either 9 or 10 or something like that to see if there was anything there, and I didn't see anything. Um, so verse 5, and behold, there was a wall on the outside of the temple all around, and in the man's hand was a measuring rod of 6 cubits, each of which was a cubit and a handbreadth. So he measured the thickness of the wall 1 rod, and the height 1 rod. So did anybody do any work on what's a cubit and what's a handbreadth? That's okay, neither did I.
I
So
think doesn't it vary over the years? I mean, I think it's about 18 inches a cubit.
is it
It's like the elbow, tip of the elbow to the middle finger.
okay?
So it kind of depends on the size of the people, and you know, some cultures are shorter than others, I guess.
Yeah,
But
and yeah,
but it's also like I know, like we still measure horses that way. You know how many hands high a horse is.
yeah.
Um, but the hands, I think was it 6 or 7 hands make a cubit. So a cubit in a hand would be the 18 inches plus the width of the palm again.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. How did they do? Yeah. Or did they have like one person that was standard?
I don't think so. And I think that's why it's a little
Yeah.
precarious, you know? I mean, because I mean, I think different, like I said, I think Israel actually was a little bit bigger than that. What they went by, well, bigger than 18, but say 18 to 20 was kind of like the range for everybody, it seemed like. So they
Okay.
didn't really seem like too concerned with precision, I guess. And
Huh. But they had to have some, or else everything would have fallen down
yeah,
when they built something. So, um, well, and just if you ever do any work on the cornerstone, it's pretty amazing.
yeah.
Um, so I have here, and I don't know, like, um, so like this is they're showing the temple size of 500 cubits by 500 cubits, but and they're saying that's 750 feet. So I guess that is, I don't know, I can't do math. Maybe that is the, it looks like 1.5, so that it looks like it would be 18 inches, if I'm looking at it correctly. So, um, according to this, that sounds about right. Um, okay, let's see. So how would I title verse 5? So yeah, this is getting broken up different than what she probably gave.
Ezekiel sees the um, temple walls.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And so then in verse 6, then he went to the gate which faced east, went up its steps and measured the threshold of the gate, 1 rod in width, and the other threshold was 1 rod in width. The guard room was 1 rod long and 1 rod wide. There were 5 cubits between the guard rooms, and the threshold of the gate by the porch of the gate facing inward was 1 rod. Then he measured the porch of the gate facing inward 1 rod, and he measured the porch of the gate 8 cubits, and its side pillars 2 cubits, and the porch of the gate was faced inward. The guard rooms of the gate towards the east numbered 3 on each side, and the 3 of them had the same measurement. The side pillars also had the same measurement on each side. And he measured the width of the gateway 10 cubits, and the length of the gate 13 cubits. There was a barrier wall 1 cubit wide in front of the guard rooms on each side, and the guard rooms were 6 cubits square on each side. He measured the gate from the roof of one of the guard room to the roof of the other, a width of 25 cubits from one door to the door opposite. He made the side pillars 60 cubits high. The gate extended round about to the side pillar of the courtyard. From the front of the entrance gate to the front of the inner porch of the gate was 50 cubits. There were shuttered windows looking toward the guard rooms and toward their side pillars within the gate all around, and likewise for the porches. And there were windows all around inside, and on each side pillar were palm tree ornaments. All right. So we have our first mention of palm tree ornaments. Did anybody do any work on palm tree? Why the palm tree?
Well, I mean, the whole triumphal march, I think we talked about that maybe in Colossians or somewhere.
Hmm.
But, after a victory, a battle, victory, and they're, I think, a sign of relief or refreshment, like in the desert, you see palm trees, don't, you know, you don't see much, but you do see them, and it's a sign of life, and because they've got water, and God does a lot with water in the Bible, living water and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Um,
So
it's pretty
yeah,
strong, pretty solid tree too. I mean, you look at it in the areas where they do get the hurricanes and stuff. I mean, they get uprooted sometimes, but they can withstand quite a bit. They're pretty strong.
yeah, yep, for sure. So yeah, I mean, you pretty much hit on everything. They're associated with beauty, fruitfulness, and prosperity. They're waved after victory or triumph in battle. So yes, Palm Sunday, that Hosanna, that was actually that was like a war cry, so to speak. And also basically them wanting, saying Jesus is King. Um, and then yes, if you see a palm in the desert, you can bet that there's water. Um, so it's a place, it represents a place of peace and refuge, and we see that water, like you said, God does a lot with water throughout Scripture, the living water, and also they stand tall and strong even in the harshest environment. So too shall the righteous stand firm in faith. So there's a lot of symbolism and imagery here. You'll have some cross references on your teaching chart that you can go explore. Um, and it's really cool when you go and watch that video that I'm going to link to your teaching chart. If whenever you watch it, it's going to make this make more sense. And I think they put like our measurement to it, and you get to see kind of how big and vast everything is. So that's really, really neat. It really solidifies all this in your mind. Um, so how can I title verses 6 through 16? What gate are we at? We're at the east gate. So we're at the east gate, the outer court entrance, and she gave you this temple complex map in your um, study to look at and to get a visual. And I'll send this one out. This is more of a 3D version of it, so you can look at it. You go through this again. All right, so the east gate and outer court entrance, and then verse 17. Let's see. Then he brought me into the outer court, and behold, there were chambers and a pavement made for the court all around. 30 chambers faced the pavement. The pavement, that is, the lower pavement, was by the side of the gates, corresponding to the length of the gate. Then he measured the width from the front of the lower gate to the front of the exterior of the inner court, 100 cubits on the east and on the north. As for the gate of the outer court, which faced the north, he measured, went too far. Okay, so 17 through 19, how could I title that?
The outer court.
Yep. So inside the outer court. So 20, as for the gate of the outer court which faced the north, he measured its length and its width, and it had 3 guards rooms on each side, and its side pillars and its porches had the same measurement as the first gate. Its length was 50 cubits, and the width was 25 cubits. Its windows and its porches and its palm tree ornaments had the same measurements as the gate which faced towards the east, and it was reached by 7 steps, and its porch was in front of them. The inner court had a gate opposite the gate on the north, as well as the gate on the east, and he measured 100 cubits from gate to gate. So this is basically the north gate. And the next one, 24 through 31, is the south gate. So then he led me towards the south, and behold, there was a gate towards the south, and he measured its side pillars and its porches according to those same measurements. The gate and its porches had windows all around, like those other windows. The length was 50 cubits, and the width was 25 cubits. Then there were 7 steps going up to it, and its porches were in front of them, and it had palm tree ornaments on its side pillars, one on each side. The inner court had a gate towards the south, and he measured from gate to gate towards the south 100 cubits. Then he brought me to the inner court by the south gate, and he measured the south gate according to those same measurements. Its guard rooms also, its side pillars and its porches were according to those same measurements, and the gate and its porches had windows all around, and it was 50 cubits long and 25 cubits wide. There were porches all around, 25 cubits long and 5 cubits wide. Its porches were towards the outer court, and palm tree ornaments were on its side pillars, and its stairway had 8 steps. So he brought me into the inner court towards the east, and he measured the gate according to those same measurements. Its guard rooms also, and its side pillars and its porches were according to those same measurements. And the gate and its porches had windows all around. It was 50 cubits long and 25 cubits wide. Its porches were towards the outer court, and the palm tree ornaments were on its side pillars on each side. And its stairway had 8 steps. Then he brought me to the north gate, and he measured it according to those same measurements with its guard rooms, its side pillars, and its porches. And the gate had windows all around. The length was 50 cubits, and the width 25 cubits. Its side pillars were towards the outer court, and palm ornaments were on its side pillars on each side. And its stairway had 8 steps. So 32 through 34, we have the east inner court gate. And then 35 through 37, you have the north inner court entrance, or the north gate, inner court entrance. And then 38 through 43. So you're just kind of titling them by what parts of this he's describing. Is the north gate, inner chambers. And this one gets interesting. So a chamber with its doorway was by the side pillars at the gate. There they rinsed the burnt offering. In the porch of the gate were 2 tables on each side on which to slaughter the burnt offering, the sin offering, and the guilt offering. On the outer side, as one went up to the gateway towards the north, were 2 tables, and on the other side of the porch gate were 2 tables. 4 tables were on each side next to the gate, or 8 tables on which they slaughter sacrifices. For the burnt offering, there were 4 tables of hewn stone, a cubit and a half long, and a cubit and a half wide, and 1 cubit high, on which they lay the instruments with which they slaughter the burnt offering and the sacrifice. The double hooks, 1 handbreadth in length, were installed in the house all around, and on the tables was the flesh of the offering. Okay. What does this mean? Because we know that we're studying the third temple here. It doesn't match up with anything else. And I have a comparison chart here that shows you the size of this is Ezekiel's temple. It's huge. This was the size. This is Solomon's temple, and this is Herod's temple. And then this right here is an American football field. So it just gives you kind of a point of reference of how big this is. When you watch that video and you start seeing our measurements on it, and kind of more of a 3D, it's huge. But there's sacrifices there, and they describe 3: the burnt, the sin, and the guilt offering. So what's going on here? Why are we having sacrifices in the millennial temple? Or in the third temple?
Well, I think that's a good question. I'm not sure. I felt there was enough information to really figure it out. But, I mean, part of it is, at the time of, well, Jesus Christ, ultimate sacrifice and, that whole thing. So why would we need more? But if they're going to be having them there, then he's trying to say something to us. But is this just the temple that at the beginning of when it's there? Is this before Israel repents as a nation? So are they still under that old piece where they're doing sacrifices, or is this temple entirely after they've repented as a nation?
Oh, that's a good point, because it's not until halfway through that 7 years that he takes away the sacrifice.
Uh-huh. Yeah, so this is we call it the third temple, or Ezekiel's temple. So the first temple was obliterated by the Babylonians, and then they went back and they built what we call it was obliterated by the Babylonians. That was Solomon's temple. The second temple was built during the Medo-Persian Empire, and we call it Herod's temple, because Herod actually made it, expanded and made it really grand and all that kind of stuff, to appease the Jews. But this one is your third temple, and it's huge. And so we need to find out, okay, what's going on here? Because we know that the Jews will have, they will be worshiping in their temple, they will be giving sacrifices, and the Antichrist is going to cut off the sacrifice. He's going to seat himself in the temple. He is the abomination of desolation. He's going to seat himself in the temple and demand to be worshipped as God. Is this temple that we're studying the same temple? We don't know. um, I need to look into that more to see if there's more cross-referencing to that, to be sure. If it, I mean, but this thing is huge.
No, with all the Jews coming in from all the corners, I mean, you would think you would need a bigger temple.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, this thing is 750 feet wide. How big is that?
A lot bigger than the land the one sits on right now. Not sure how that one gets pulled off, but
Yeah.
they would have to move it, I would think, because I mean, or something would happen. Something has to happen because there's not. I don't think Israel has that much land, do they?
No. Oh my goodness. We have lots of questions. Yeah, they don't have that much land. This is huge. Uh, the personal application, I was like, okay, this is cool. I was like, you're studying your future here. It's like, well, yeah, we look at this and we're like, okay, just change the Jews, it's their temple, move on. Um, but I was like, we're gonna be here. We're gonna be walking through this, and especially whenever you see that video, and especially if you're a minimalist like I am, like you're gonna be like, this is awesome. But I was like, we're gonna be walking in and out of there. Um, I was like, we're looking at our future. But yeah, just the size of it, I'm like, is this like, this can't be, I mean, unless something happens, drastically happens. Um, and so I would like to go in and do some cross-referencing. We have 3 weeks. I think maybe we should explore that more, because next week is more, or the second half of the lesson is more of the details. What are we looking at here? Is this the temple that they will be doing the sacrifices in, that comes from that peace treaty with the Antichrist, or is this like a whole different thing? What's going on? So let's do some cross-referencing on that for our next lesson. Um, if it is if this is it, or if this is millennial, the sacrifices and burnt offerings, because I think there's some other things um, that we might come across that I know I've always gone, huh? Um, what do you think would be the purpose of still having sacrifices in the millennial reign?
There must be still some people in the flesh.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So what was the law in general? What was it supposed to show people?
Their sin.
Yes. Yes, we're never meant to, because we can't keep it because we're of the flesh, but it was to show us, like, so Leviticus, the theme of the book is how to approach a holy God, and all of these things that they did, the burnt offering, the sin offering, and the guilt offering, those were part of that system of how to approach a holy God. Um, and all of those festivals and feasts, there was pictures, and it was only through Christ. Everything was a picture of Christ, and only through Christ can you approach a holy God. And we're going to get into that. One of our key words later on is going to be holy. And we're also going to see a contrast between holy and profane. So whenever we get deeper into the millennial reign, and because we've done Revelation, we've done a little bit of millennial reign. Now, whenever Jesus comes back and we have judgment of the nations and things like that, at that point in history, everyone still alive will be a believer, but there will be people born to those people. And will everyone be a believer?
I want to say no, because when Satan is released, he fools a lot of people. A
Yeah,
lot of people.
he leads them to the second Gog Magog war. So he leads them to the first one. He gathers everybody, 3 unclean spirits of frogs or whatever. He gathers them for the first Gog Magog war, and then what you call Armageddon. And then he gathers them again. He's released. He gathers them again at the end of the millennial reign. So yeah, and there are some things that I think we see it in Ezekiel later about like the son does this and the parents do that. So there is, I got really excited um, because, Katie, she was talking about it and she was like, and if you think about it, we were made to be a kingdom of priests. We're a kingdom of priests. What is our role? Because we come with Jesus, with in the seventh bowl, we're those armies of heaven, clothed in white. We come with him. What's our job in the millennial reign? Or we just like to sit there and look pretty? I mean, that would be nice, especially if we can go sleep and stuff. But we don't need to. We'll have our new bodies. But I mean, what's our job? What are we doing?
Interceding for the people.
I'm sorry?
We're attending Jesus and interceding.
Yeah, I mean, we're attending to him. We're interceding for the people, but we're evangelizing and teaching too, and we're ruling and reigning with him. This is gonna be fun. I was like, we still all have our, our spiritual gifts, our roles. Um, I was like, this is gonna be fun. We're basically, it's like, yeah, we look at this and we're just like, okay, yeah, well, the third temple, but I mean, we're gonna be walking in and out of here, and Jesus is gonna be there, and we're gonna be still like interacting and helping people, and um, it's gonna be neat. It's gonna be really cool. I'm like, we're studying our future. Um, it's kind of like what to expect. So, I think we're gonna get more into the sacrifices with the part B of this lesson, but and we kind of need to look at is this it as far as that third temple, and there is no other. Um, so I would like to, if she does not take you into your homework with the burnt sin and guilt offering, I would go into Leviticus and see what those are all about. I think also in here it mentions the grain offering. Um, so 38 through 43 was the North Gate inner chambers, and so now we have 44 through 47. From the outside to the inner gate were chambers for the singers in the inner court, one of which was at the side of the north gate with its front towards the south, and one at the side of the south gate facing towards the north. And he said to me, This is a chamber which faces towards the south, intended for the priest to keep charge of the temple. But the chamber which faces towards the north is for the priest to keep charge of the altar. So you have the priest to keep charge of the temple and the priest to keep charge of the altar. These are the sons of Zedek, from whom the sons of Levi come near to the Lord to minister to him. Did anybody do any work on Zadok, the priest?
He was the first high priest who served in the Temple of Solomon.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, you can just look it up and get some cross references there, and so we see kind of a difference here of priest to keep charge of the temple, and then the priest to keep charge of the altar, and you can bet everybody wants to know if there's son of Zadok. Um, so again, I boxed in this heavenly being actually spoke. Um, so I boxed that in too. And I did anybody find it interesting the brevity with which he spoke?
I guess I didn't. I just, I mean, God seems like he's very concise.
Mm-hmm.
So I just took it as, kind of being in line with that.
Oh yeah,
Maybe
yeah. It
there's
doesn't.
more to it.
Yeah, there's no mincing words. Um, but he does have to repeat himself. Because we're hard-headed and stubborn. So, well, what I found interesting is that Ezekiel's sitting there like writing all of these details down that I would not remember. I would be like, what? What was that? I mean, he is just writing all of this down in detail. And then when this person speaks, like this person isn't explaining it to him. He's like, yeah, this is, I mean, he explains like a couple of things, but it's like, this is stuff that um, just, I don't know. I found it, I was like, well, yeah, I mean, Ezekiel would know the layout of the temple and things like that. I mean, it was just very like brief, like this stuff. I don't, I found it interesting. Um, the 47, he measured the court a perfect square, 100 cubits long and 100 cubits wide, and the altar was in front of the temple. So, this is huge. You're really gonna like that video. Um, and yeah, she has it's a little more detailed on the map that she gave you as far as those measurements. I mean, that video really shows you really get a sense of how big this is and how many people, like, start thinking about it, how many people could fit in there. It's pretty neat. And another thing that came to mind, and I could be totally crazy and off my rocker, is I want to also do some work in that New Jerusalem in Revelation, at the end of Revelation, see if there's any comparisons there. Not saying that that is it. I just want to see the comparisons of some of the sizes and stuff. Um, so 44 through 47, we have the inner court, uh, the north and south side. And then he brought me to the porch of the temple and measured each side pillar of the porch, 5 cubits on each side, and the width of the gate was 3 cubits on each side, and the length of the porch was 20 cubits, with the width 11 cubits. And at the stairway by which it was ascended were columns belonging to the side pillars, each on one side. So this one is the porch of the temple. So how could I title this whole chapter, chapter 40?
Ezekiel gets a vision of Israel's third and future temple.
Mm-hmm. Now, what's interesting is here's Ezekiel. It's 14 years after Jerusalem and the temple has been destroyed, and he's getting a vision of the third temple. The second temple still has to be built. Just interesting observation. So 41. So then he brought me into the nave. Did anybody do a word study on this?
Not recently, but I think it's the outer sanctuary.
Hmm. So just a dictionary definition. It's like the central part of a church, or and then I looked at. Of course, I didn't write the numbers down, but I just looked at it. It was like sanctuary, palace. Um, this is where that link to the NIV through Blue Letter Bible comes in that I'm going to send you. And I usually don't go to NIV at all. NIV is a phrase by phrase translation. But this chapter got a little confusing. Kind of whenever you're tracking all this, you're like, what are they talking about? Um, and so whenever things get confusing, you can do a word study. Um, I mean, we're tracking along with our literary flow and what they're talking about, and you kind of see it's like there's a little back and forth, and talk about one thing and then go back to this thing. Um, but you can look at your literary flow, you can look at your context, you can do a word study, you can go to the dictionary and get the dictionary definition. And one of the tools you can use is different translations. And so if I'm going to a different translation, I usually do like ESV and King James. I might want to make sure I'm on the 1995 NASB if I'm looking at my like Study Light or Blue Letter Bible or whatever. Um, and then, and this is like with really hard passages, then you can go to like NIV. NIV is a phrase by phrase translation. Um, and then, I mean, you can New King James and things like that just to see like how they render it. Sometimes it will give you a little more insight. So the NIV actually they flipped between outer sanctuary and inner sanctuary. So they actually did a pretty good job of making this more understandable. So I went through and I read that and kind of wrote in some of the words that they used for some of these things. Um, so you guys will have that link to read through that. So then he brought me to the nave, which NIV rendered it main hall, and measured the side pillar 6 cubits wide on each side was the width of the side pillar. The width of the entrance was 10 cubits, and the sides of the entrance were 5 cubits on each side. And he measured the length of the nave or the main hall 40 cubits, and the width 20 cubits. Then he went inside um, and measured each side pillar of the door 2 cubits, and the doorway 6 cubits high, and the width of the doorway 7 cubits high. And he measured its length 20 cubits, and the width 20 cubits before the nave. And he said to me, "This is the most holy place." So just from that, we know that, okay, Now we're at the Holy of Holies. And I have here, he went inside. I put inner sanctuary, most holy place. Um, so 1 through 4, how could I title this?
The most holy place.
hmm So then he measured the wall of the temple, 6 cubits, and the width of the side chambers, 4 cubits all around, about the house on every side. The side chambers were in 3 stories, one above another, and 30 in each story, and the side chambers extended to the wall which stood on their inward side all around, that they might be fastened and not be fastened into the wall of the temple itself. The side chambers surrounding the temple were wider at each successive story, because the structure surrounding the temple went upward by stages in all sides of the temple. Therefore, the width of the temple increased as it went higher, and thus one went up from the lowest story to the highest by way of the second story. I saw also that the house had a raised platform all around, and the foundations of the side chambers were a full rod of 6 long cubits in height. The thickness of the outer wall of the side chambers was 5 cubits, but the free space between the side chambers belonging to the temple and the outer chambers was 20 cubits in width all around the temple on every side. The doorways of the side chambers towards the free space consisted of one doorway towards the north and another doorway towards the south, and the width of the free space was 5 cubits all around. So 5 through 11, we have the wall, um, side chambers, and platform of the temple. And that video, it's only like 12 minutes long, so it's an easy, quick watch. You really get like just how big this is and how high these things are. Um, and then you start thinking about the other scriptures and things like that about, it really brings it in. That video is really good at bringing it in fruition and giving it a good visual of your mind, or in your mind. And I just kept thinking, wow, we're going to be there. Okay, so 12 through 15, the building that was in front of the separate area at the side toward the west was 70 cubits wide, and the wall of the building was 5 cubits thick all around, and its length was 90 cubits. Then he measured the temple, 100 cubits long. The separate area within the building and its walls were also 100 cubits long. Also, the width of the front of the temple and that of the separate areas along the east side totaled 100 cubits. He measured the length of the building along the front of the separate area behind it, with a gallery on each side, and 100 cubits. So you can probably can't see. So this goes 12 to verse 15a, and then it's 15b, and you can do this. So he also measured the inner nave and the porch of the court. The thresholds of the latticed windows and the galleries around about, or 3 stories opposite the threshold, were paneled with wood all around and from the ground to the windows, but the windows were covered over the entrance into the inner house, or inner sanctuary, most holy place, and on the outside and all the wall around and inside and outside by measurement. So 12 through 15a, you have a separate building on the west side of the temple. And then 15b through 17, you have the inner nave and porches of the court. So then 18 through 20, and it was carved with cherubim and palm trees, and a palm tree was between cherub, and every cherub had two faces, a man's face towards the palm tree on one side, and a young lion's face towards the palm tree on the other side. And they were carved on all the house all around. From the ground to above the entrance, cherubim and palm trees were carved, as well as on the wall of the nave. So this is the carvings of the inner house. Now the cherubim, what did you guys discover about that?
They serve God.
Yeah, so we see them in the beginning of Ezekiel. There, remember when we did like there was like cherubim and the wheels, and they had four faces described. These have two. But yeah, they are around. I mean, they're around the throne. You see them in Revelation in the throne room. Those are cherubim. Um, so yeah, I mean they're right there. What is the significance of what do they do? What were they created for?
Well, sometimes they deliver messages from God to people. I
Mm-hmm.
think that's in Revelation and maybe First Peter. They then in Ezekiel 9, they executing the judgment of God.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. So you'll get a little list on this with some cross references that they were created to serving and worshiping God, to serve the people that God saves. So Hebrews talks about ministering spirit, to deliver messages from God to man, to wage in spiritual battle, and to do the will of their creator, to execute God's judgments, and to aid in the transmission and furtherance of God's word. So we see two symbols, the uh, two imagery pieces here: the palm trees and the cherubim, and it's all in relation. It's to God's relationship and provision for us. So and you're just screaming, screaming. I love you guys. Um, so let's see. 21, this gets cool. The 21, the doorposts of the nave, or the most holy place, were square. As for the front of the sanctuary, the appearance of one doorpost was like that of the other. The altar was of wood, 3 cubits high, and its length 2 cubits. Its corners and its base and its sides were of wood. And he said to me, "This is the table that is before the Lord." The nave and the sanctuary each had a double door. Each of the doors had 2 leaves, 2 swinging leaves, 2 leaves for one door and 2 leaves for the other. Also, there were carved on them on the doors of the nave cherubim and palm trees, like those carved on the walls, and there was a threshold of wood on the front of the porch outside. There were lattice windows and palm trees on one side, and on the other, on the sides of the porch, there were the side chambers of the house of the threshold. Okay, so what was this altar of wood? The altar was of wood. What was that?
Altar of incense
Mm-hmm.
in the Holy of Holies.
Yep. So Yeah, your altar of incense. Okay, so we've gotten, let's see, 21 through 26. Um, so the nave and sanctuary equal the most holy place. So we've gotten, we haven't hit 42 yet, but we're getting this description. We've gotten, okay, there's some sacrifices going on here. They've talked about 3 so far. Now we're in the Holy of Holies. We got the cherubim in there, and on the Ark of the Covenant in the old temple there was the cherubim. So we might want to pull out, when we're doing our detailed work, some of those maps of the tabernacle and temple, and some of that. The NISB actually has like little pictures in it. The New Inductive Study Bible, when you're going along in Exodus and Leviticus, it has like little pictures of things. Um, so you might want to look at that. But what are some things that are missing so far that we haven't seen that were in that temple?
There was the table of showbread, the lampstands.
Yeah. Table of showbread, lampstand, and there's something else. What tore whenever Christ?
Oh, yeah, I was going to say the curtain.
Yep. So we have a picture here of direct access. There is the veil is it's just so it's interesting. So we need to pull out all of our little maps and charts and things like that, and look at some of the stuff as we're doing part B. What is a good chapter theme for Ezekiel 41? What is it mostly about?
The most holy place.
Yeah, so the most holy place, one chamber. So 42. So then he brought me into the outer court, the way towards the north, and he brought me to the chamber which was opposite the separate area and opposite the building towards the north. Along the length, which was 100 cubits, was the north door. The width was 50 cubits. Opposite the 20 cubits, which belonged to the inner court, and opposite the pavement, which belonged to the outer court, was gallery corresponding to gallery in 3 stories. Before the chambers was an inner walk 10 cubits wide, a way of 100 cubits, and their openings were on the north. Now the upper chambers are smaller because the galleries took more space away from them than from the lower and middle ones in the building. For they were in 3 stories and had no pillars like the pillars of the court. Therefore the upper chambers were set back from the ground upwards more than the lower and middle ones. As for the outer wall by the side of the chambers towards the outer court facing the chambers, its length was 50 cubits. For the length of the chambers which were in the outer court was 50 cubits, and behold, the length of those facing the temple was 100 cubits. Below these chambers was the entrance on the east side, as one enters them from the outer court. In the thickness of the wall of the court towards the east, facing the separate area and facing the building, there were chambers. The way in front of them was like the appearance of the chambers which were on the north, according to the length, so was their width. And all their exits were both according to their arrangements and openings. Corresponding to the openings of the chambers which was towards the south was an opening at the head of the way in front of the wall towards the east, as one enters them. Then he said to me, the north chambers and the south chambers, which are opposite the separate area, they are the holy chambers where the priests who are near to the Lord shall eat the most holy things. There they shall lay the most holy things, the grain offering, the sin offering, and the guilt offering, for the place is holy. So we've heard about the sin offering, the guilt offering. Now we have the grain offering, and we have our key word, holy. So when the priests enter, they shall not go into the outer court from the sanctuary without laying their garments in which they minister, for they are holy. They shall put on other garments. Then they shall approach that which is for the people. So we're still getting this picture of how do I approach a holy God. Okay, 1 through 14. So we're getting the priest chambers, north and south, and they are what kind of chambers?
Holy.
Mm-hmm. So they are holy chambers. So 15 through 20. So now when he had finished measuring the inner house, he brought me out by the way of the gate, which faced towards the east, and measured it all around. He measured on the east side with the measuring reed 500 reeds by the measuring reed, and he measured on the north side 500 reeds by the measuring reed, and on the south side he measured 500 reeds with the measuring reed. He turned to the west side and measured 500 reeds with the measuring reed. He measured it on the four sides, and it had a wall all around, the length 500 and the width 500, to divide between the holy and the profane. So this is just the temple wall measured. But this last statement here, to separate between the holy and the profane, because we saw here, up here within these chambers, that the priests who are near to the Lord, they shall eat the most holy things. There they shall lay the most holy things, the grain offering, the sin offering, the guilt offering. The place is holy. When the priests enter, they shall not go into the outer court from the sanctuary without laying there their garments in which they minister, for they are holy. They shall put on other garments, and then they shall approach that which is for the people. So we see this contrast here of the holy, and then down here the profane. So whenever you're looking at this as a whole, now what would our chapter title be for this? Like, what is the temple? What is this temple doing?
It's dividing the two areas, the holy and the profane, but also serves to show the people of Israel how to get to God.
Yes. And why would that be? Why would they need to know?
He wants them in heaven with him.
Yeah. So there's still, so this is the third temple, and we're seeing, okay, sacrifices, and we're seeing some of the same things that we saw in the first and second temple and tabernacle and things like that. And those things were to teach the people. When you look at the law, Genesis starts out, who is God, who is man, and that's what the law was teaching them. This is who I am. This is who you are. And this is how you approach a holy God. And at the crux of it is the person of Jesus Christ, because all of those things were pointing to him. All those feasts, all those festivals, all the offerings and things like that, they were all a picture and pointing to him. So in this third temple, we have the same thing. We have that he's just the same pictures, all point. This is who I am. This is who you are, and this is how you approach a holy God. And we still have those same pictures that were pointing that point to the person of Jesus Christ. Same thing going on here. So it's pretty neat. I think it helps if you look at what was the purpose of the law, who is God, who is man, this is how man approaches a holy God, then we start seeing this picture here. And whenever you realize in the millennial reign, there's still going to be earthly people that are giving birth and having kids, and they're still going to need to be taught. I think start getting a clear understanding of this. Whereas a lot of times we read these things and we kind of scratch our heads and go, huh? And then we look over it and just say, okay, well, I'll just figure that out later, probably whenever I'm there. But we can figure it out now. Just with, I mean, we've done the whole book of Ezekiel, we've set our context. We've studied some other books, so we have some cross-referencing we can go look at.